Thank you very much also to Peter, of course, for inviting me here in Belgrade. I'm very glad to be here. And thank you very much in advance for listening to this lecture. And I will talk about Benjamin's the work of art in a political way, let's say. And I'm going to start taking the cue from a recent successful pamphlet by Pierre Zawi, named La discrétion, l'art de disparaître, which appeared in France last year. And because he says something that's interesting, I will not talk about Zawi at all, but just taking the cue from him. According to Zawi, ours is a world made of rootless people, of placeless people, without filiation. It is a world of déracinement généralisé. What happens with politics now in our world, according to Zawi, is a radical horizontalization of relationships. Zawi, is looking for a discrete politics. Within the domain of discretion, he says, everybody are on the same equality plan. So there is a kind of topological perspective. Equality is a plan we all live in. There is a sort of alliance between our society, our equalitarian society, and the new technique means which we have learned to be accustomed to. We have this alliance produces an excess of control, surveillance cameras, drones, injunctions of visibility, and the cult of the image of the self. But at the same time, on the other hand, this alliance between equalitarian society and technique produces some uncommon chances to disappear, to vanish, to extend a domain of personal discretion through new forms, new techniques of anonymity. This is what Zawi proposes, a collaboration between an indiscrete macro-politics and a discrete micro-politics. Macro-politics must preserve, according to him, at all costs, the forms of democratic transparency and the access of anybody to visibility, to avoid the atrocious terror of discretional powers. Micropolitics should instead promote the anonymity forms, the zones of indiscernibility. In this crossroads, Zawi's argumentation is interesting for me today, because it cannot avoid passing through a place which, according to some perspectives, is only a legacy of the past. This place is the city. The city, in Zawi's perspective, is the place where the intersection between macro politics and micro politics, I'm sorry for this continuous difference in differentiation. The city is the place where this crossroads, this intersection, takes place under the common concept of an ambiguous equality, a bizarre and ambiguous equality. The metropolis model is still the core, can still be the core of a meditation, of a political meditation, because it's these new forms of discretion, also that we talks about, were born in 19th century Paris, in Baudelaire's Paris, which Benjamin talked about in his studies, where a new love was born for uninterrupted urban life, for anonymous life, for crowds, for impersonal life. It was an experience of the world city in modern capitalism. What I would like to propose today, leaving Zawi behind, is a metaphorical and conceptual analogy between the 19th century flaneur and nowadays indiscreet and discreet at the same time web surfer. Walter Benjamin, who writes exactly at half between the two historical moments, 19th century and today, will be our guide, because he feels the need to discuss these issues, talking radically about technique. Let's start from some 19th century, elements. First of all, the crowd, die Menge in German. The crowd is the structure towering above the flaneur, who gets intoxicated by it, says Benjamin. Because the crowd is the last drug for those who are at the mercy of the others. Moreover, walking in the crowd, the flaneur shares the situation of the commodity, of the good who is sold on the market. The last shelter, the last drug, and in the most peculiar way, the crowd is the domain where one can feel at one can feel sympathetic with the exchange value. Why so? How this happens? The crowd is where different people find themselves together, says Benjamin, although they have different interests. Benjamin says that their common end, their common goal in gathering, may be conscious or not, is the market. In the situation of a gathering, the material end is definitely contingent. It has no previous preconsidered structure. The one who gathers in front of a shop window, in front of a football match, in front of a car accident, he is socially abstract. In this crowding, his instinct is gregarious, Herdentrieb is the German term. His acting is only a reflex, reflektorisches Handeln. We'll have to pay the right attention to this double element, gregarious instinct and acting in a reflected way. Benjamin, in his Baudelaire studies, discusses Baudelaire's flaneur in his analogies and differences with respect to Edgar Allan Poe's Man of the Crowd. But in Benjamin's flânerie, ends up to express the underlying economic structure. Benjamin notes how in Poe's stories, the men of the crowd show a dubious conformism, a sort of disturbing horizontality. Let's take this Zawi's expression, horizontalization. People in the crowd all wear the same clothes. Their faces are distorted by haste or by excessive attention paid to the time or to the look, their external look. They look confused. Often they bow to those who have banged into them. But they are no social misfits getting drunk at the edge of the street. According to Poe, they are noblemen, they are dealers, they are procurers, they are agents, they are financiers. Such homogeneous conducts in the crowd are, according to Benjamin, related to the mimetic influences dictated by economy. Actually, Benjamin is suggesting that these people would be mimicking the machines at work in the industry in the 19th century. So there is something clownesque emerging in the people of the crowd, in the behaviorist sense of the comic mechanism. The example Benjamin proposes is very interesting because he's talking right afterwards about the figure of the eccentric in the theater or in the cabaret, in the circus shows. He says that in the show of the eccentric, which was the one who had this particular pièce in the theater, walking in disconnected movements with showing his ability in music, but walking in a very strange way. He says that in the show of the eccentric, it is self-evident that there is a relationship with economy. In his disconnected movements, he imitates both the machines and, more generally, the economic trend that's hitting the commodity at his time. It is an analog mimesis of the hectic dash of material production, and its commercial forms is made by the particles of crowd as Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, describes them. In Poe's description, it is visible what the fair, the Luna Park, that turned the everyday man in the eccentric, later managed to do using roller coaster and similar things. In his stories, people act as if they could express themselves only on the basis of a reflex. So the hectic dash of material production is an expression dating back to Marx in the Accent et Brumaire with Bonaparte with regard to America. What is important for us now is that Benjamin underlines such uniform eccentricity in the democratic horizontalization of the capitalistic city, Paris in the 19th century. This situation of everybody being uniform and bizarre at the same time also means feeling sympathetic with the commodity form. In bourgeois society at the half of the 19th century, eccentricity, in the general meaning, not in the theater or cabaret meaning, eccentricity starts presenting itself as a strange mass normality, provoked by an equally strange and reflecting mimesis. Within the mass, the crowd, people move on the basis of a reflex, only if stimulated, but this movement sounds both eccentric and standardizing. And this very twofold feature is what Benjamin investigates also from the point of view of the internal mutation of the work of art, maybe in a more optimistic way. In his essay on the work of art, the eccentric, in the particular meaning of the theater figure, is mentioned as the forerunner of the comedies which provoke a therapeutic deflagration of the unconscious. The technicization in cinema works, in a way, promotes a sort of distance from mass psychosis, which was to be seen in totalitarian states in the 30s. The eccentric, the crooner, the spotlight chaser in the cabaret, in the circus, in Benjamin's work of art, is determined as the Trockenwohner of a new perception. Who is the Trockenwohner? Who is this guy? In the age of industrialization, the Trockenwohner is the provisory first lodger in the new buildings, one who lived under the bridges normally, and who was paid a little bit to live in new buildings in order to let the new paint on the walls be dried for 3 months. And metaphorically, the eccentric, according to Benjamin, is the first lodger in the play spaces created by cinema, is the one who has helped the masses open the door of perception to the exhibition value, to the deritualization of the work of art. Figures like the eccentric, and later in cinema, people like Charlie Chaplin, which Benjamin mentions in the work of art, has helped the opening of this process. This is the reason why the example of the Luna Park of the fairs in the Passagenarbeit is perfect for our goal. The industry of the universal media goes together with the democratic factories of leisure and fun, which opened at the end of the 19th century, the loisir for the middle class. Benjamin does not express a judgment value concerning this point. He's only interested in isolating the reflectory side of the behavior in the masses, in the crowds. He emphasizes the generalizations of the extravagant behavior as the mimetic effect generated by machines and, more generally, by material and economic trends. It is clear, though, that Benjamin, as he talks of the capitalistic Paris metropolis, also thinks of his 20th century Berlin, a democratic city, apparently a perfectly democratic city for 14 years, which was equally aesthetized by fun, cabaret, and commodities. A strange city where the normalization of eccentricity was a cold fact, but where a critic threshold concerning commodity form of individuals seemed to be erased by the uniformity of behaviors. I'll make a brief passage on Benjamin's doctrine of perception concerning the concept of equality. Because the behavior domain is not the unique domain where homogeneity reigns. According to Benjamin, there is also beyond behavior a perception of equality. But in his Baudelaire studies, Benjamin states that such perception of equality is an altered perception provoked by drugs, by hashish and opium, which is a strange statement. Why should democratic and post-revolutionary French equality be an hallucination? Why is hallucination talking of equality? We should remember that in his epistemological theory, Benjamin opposes equality as the negative concept to similarity. In his complicated letters to Adorno of the Baudelaire period, the last part of the 30s, he says that equality is a category of knowledge. It is not a category of perception itself. It can adhere to perception only through intoxication. When it becomes the means, the core shape of appearance, shine. The appearance, it has, in our case, the appearance of equality, maintains what Benjamin has called a cultural auratic element. And this element is intrinsic to the flaneur's empathy with the exchange value, the price given to commodities. When the prejudice of equality is used in social life, social phenomena are pre-comprehended as equal because they are read through the lens of the exchange value. It has with the fact that every commodity is sellable. What does the flaneur do strolling around in the streets? The flaneur, in the end, identifies with the commodity. Or better, as he says to Adorno in a letter of the February of 1939, he identifies with sellability. The flaneur imitates commodities. He feels at ease with their sellability. He ends up, in the end, turning into the sandwich man, the one who strolls around showing up the abstract concept of sellability. And this was a way in 19th century of aesthetizing commodities, which generates a reflex in social conduct. The flaneur mimics with the price, with sellability. It is analog in a way, we could suggest, to nowadays temporary worker that carries on his shoulders the abstract concept of his work being sellable as potential commodity, as equally rewardable. And sometimes, we must say, he feels strangely at ease with it. Let's sum up a little bit. According to Benjamin, in a capitalist and urban system, we are all strange together because we all imitate machines in actions, and moreover, we imitate the moment the commodity form is made, equal for equals. It is clear that such a mimesis implies the experience of the medium created by capitalist production, seriality. Let's try to go deep into the following question, which is typical for Benjamin's the work of art in the age of its technical reproduction. What happens really to human perception and to its organization when its technique is interwoven with what is serially reproducible? Benjamin's statement can be exposed in the following way. If such seriality, such reproducibility, does not develop any resistance, I mean resistance in things and in media and in us, obviously, then it can only cause mere serialized effects, may they be highly extravagant. Widespread eccentricity, if it is only an effect, doesn't criticize anything at all. Even if it looks like eccentricity, such mass behavior, according to Benjamin, doesn't leave of that necessary rhythm originally hidden in our mimetic capacity, in our mimetic faculty, which is a critical instant, ein kritischer Augenblick, says Benjamin, where similarities flash in a stream of things to disappear immediately afterwards. The latter was a quote from Benjamin's Lehre vom Ähnlichen, the doctrine of similarity, a writing of 1933. Benjamin's doctrine of perception is based on similarities which emerge from the time stream and are caught by the spirit, by the human faculty of thought in time. It is a sort of a secret Hegelian moment where the spirit understands its time, operating within and with technique. So to edit, I use this term on purpose, so to edit shapes of time caught in its fractions and sensed, perceived as similar. This work of editing is identical with a critical moment. It produces resistance inside seriality through similarity. Everything depends on how the archive of our medial memory is organized or edited. The ethical, political goal of such an editing operation would be exactly the opposite of the derealization and anesthetization which are produced by the continuous stream of medial images we attend today. The goal in this operation that Benjamin suggests seems to be the preservation of the depth that images have with respect to that rest that we call reality. The political way that Benjamin suggests is keeping alive reality's discretion with respect to the polarization in terms of domination and derealization through media. The latter, the domination that goes along with the derealization through media, is what Benjamin fears, what Benjamin is frightened about in the last parts of the work of art. Hyper-aesthetizing media which produce anestheticizing conducts and homogeneous behaviors, mass behaviors. As everybody knows, Benjamin's essay concerns the technically reproducible works of art as a new chance, but at the same time as a huge risk, half the way between aesthetics and politics. Benjamin starts there from an initial sociological element we have already talked about, the fact that there is actually a democratization through media that is going on. We've talked about it at the beginning, speaking about the Zawi's horizontalization. What is happening today? That the original medium, the word, the language, has become the main character. Benjamin, in The Author as a Producer, an essay dating back to 1934, calls it the Literarisierung der Lebensverhältnisse, the literary expression of life condition. I quote from Benjamin, 1934, he says, "At any time today, the reader is ready to become a writer. Being an expert, as he is within the extremely specialized labor process he's in, the reader gets an access to being an author. Gewinnt einen Zugang zur Autorschaft. Labor itself starts talking, and its exhibition through words is a part of a competence which is necessary to its exercise." Stop of the quote. Therefore, dumb jobs without words, according to Benjamin, in his age and in our age, don't exist anymore. Nevertheless, and here is the razor's edge we are walking on, our authorship as specialized technicians now goes along with an aesthetic widening of the political domain. Politics seems to be definitely everywhere. This is how we perceive it. But politics has now, this widening happens with a widening of aesthetics at the same time. There is a mix between aesthetics and politics in the public opinion, which goes along with a massification of authorship, of journalism, of art itself. We are in the age of spoken word, of opinions that we continuously publish. the widespread authorship is an effective material condition, as it is, in a way, the widespread eccentricity. Benjamin dates back to 19th century. If on one hand technicality has been translated on the level of an expertise which can become communicable and in principle, but only in principle, verifiable, on the other hand, the risk is the same. The risk means that such widespread authorship can be heterodirected, for instance, by the monopoly holders of communication flows, mainly through aesthetic means. Because of this ambiguity, there is also an ambiguous perception of who has the power in new media. Because communication competences nowadays seems to be horizontal, but it is nonetheless controlled by the key holders of the whole project, who also make enormous incomes this way. Therefore, we need to articulate a critics of the all-inclusive platforms of the Gesamtkunstwerk of media commodities as we know them now, today. New digital platforms are often born as plural movements, but they often end to be unified. We have plenty of examples in the past months. But Benjamin did alert us on this very point. He said in the essay of the work of art that the risk exists that an ineludible need for new social conditions may be exploited in favor of a property owner minority. And this element of risk is still the one we are dwelling in now. On the one side, we face the connection between the apparent democratization of the authorial function, in the key of the expertise each and every one has in a different way, thanks to the verbalization of specialized work and to the plenty of media forms at our disposal. Everybody can take part, at least sharing contents and opinions. On the other hand, contradictorily, those who lead, both economically and ideologically, are very few. They are chosen on the ground of the riches, and this is a quote from Plato, Republic, 8th book, which cannot be considered as neutral. It is not neutral because of the main reason that Plato says. Riches, the god of wealth Pluto was a blind one, riches, when it becomes the leader of the disciplined city, doesn't take care of its own education, which doesn't mean indicating as a solution the old-fashioned antithesis between classical education and technical education. More to do with an education which may be familiar today with what Benjamin calls the second technique in the essay on the work of art, which is our problem now, the problem of the two techniques in Benjamin. In the third version of the work of art essay. I come to the conclusion slowly. In the materials related to the work of art, Benjamin notes an extremely relevant passage from an essay by Eric Weil. Eric Weil is my author of my PhD dissertation. This is why I found curious this link between the two. Actually, Eric Weil was a pupil by Cassirer and Abi Warburg. And he was a German Jewish who had left Berlin for Paris, just as Benjamin. But curiously, this one text is the only connection between the two of them, although they had friends in common like Raymond Aron, but they actually ignored each other in the period that they were together in Paris. In this text, Eric Weil distinguishes two techniques, just like Benjamin does in this essay on the work of art. And normally this distinction between these two techniques is assigned to Georgi Lukács and the Geschichte Klassenbewusstsein book of 1924. But maybe there is another source, and it's Eric Weil in Benjamin's distinction. According to Weil, the two of them, the two techniques, the one of quantitative physics and the one of magic, at the beginning of modernity, they fight not out of pragmatic utilitarian reasons, but because they both try to handle with nature in a different way. The first technique, according to Benjamin and to Weil, The first technique is the one that masters nature, that dominates nature, that fights with it to dominate. The second technique is the one who experiments with nature, who makes experiment with nature, and plays with it, taking a distance with respect to nature. Here's the rise, according to Benjamin, of a playful distance, a Spielraum, a margin. The playful element is emphasized by Benjamin as the opposite concept to shine appearance, while because Spiel, the play, needs reflexive and critical operations. The cinematic, photographic, reproducible age in front of Benjamin, the one age we see incredibly enhanced today, is that of an ambiguous, playful and critical Abstand von der Natur, a distance from nature, and not that of a Naturbeherrschung, a domination of nature. What does cinema do, for instance? Benjamin says that cinema works for the adaptation of the audience, the Anpassung, to the machines, the Apparatur, in ordinary life, the incredibly wide field of the machines in ordinary life. The second technique helps, according to Benjamin, in making ordinary life not a reflex, not a mere reflex of the machines, but to live a relationship with these machines, to leave this distance and to inhabit it in a creative way. Preserving distance means no estrangement at all. Technique makes a distance in a playful way, which must be understood as critical. Otherwise, it produces Entfremdung, estrangement and alienation. In fact, Benjamin's comments to Weil's passage on the two techniques is seemingly very curious, because after having quoted Rick Weil's and the difference between the magic technique and the scientific quantitative physics technique, he says simply this, that the masses today passionately long to get nearer to things. Why so? Why do we need, as masses, a nearer approach to things? Because this longing, according to Benjamin, is only the other side of the constant estrangement nowadays life has as a consequence for the human being, not only with respect to him, but also with respect to things. The desire to get nearer to things is the other side of everyday's life, Entfremdung. So, either there is a critical, reflexive play, Spiel, of the second technique, or, in the first technique, we only have at our disposal the problematic category of Traumkitsch, the dream kitsch. We relate to things with a sort of a dream of their being kitsch, which is a problematic category Benjamin uses since Einbahnstraße in the book of 1926. What's the dream kitsch, the Traumkitsch? It's the last mask of the trivial things which we dream, so to receive a phantom of the disappeared world of things. Dream kitsch is then a subjective survival of the world of things, which technique posts in a distance from us we cannot cover anymore. Dream kitsch is the Sache eines Traums, we could say, how to say that? The contrary of the Marxist Traum einer Sache, the dream of a thing. It means that the technical relationship has no critical political feature. It only works for massified aestheticization. Moreover, this aestheticization passes through the useless objects, the ready-made, through which the bourgeoisie sees herself as eternal, inside the private house. The bourgeois flat, becomes a shelter, in the very moment where every action starts to leave traces, and photography, the art of photography, fixes in a durable and ambiguous way the man's traces. What our contemporary infinite archives do? In a way, they continue to mimic what's secret in human beings, just as photography, the first photographers tried to do. The paradox is that our archives are made of infinite photographic documents which reproduce seriality. Then, and I come to my conclusion, what would a political use of the second technique, the one who plays with nature, mean? Would the answer to this question explain something also of the politicization of art, which Benjamin talks about at the end of his work of art essay, in opposite to the aestheticization of politics? Maybe, because in the work of art, Benjamin says something really strange and peculiar, which is the title of my talks today. He says, nowadays, each and every man has the claim to be filmed, the Anspruch to be filmed. Well, I'm pretty sure that this sentence does not mean an anticipation of Andy Warhol's 15 minutes of celebrity. But where does a non-Warholian reading of this point find its sources? Well, there is a copy of this sentence in an article Benjamin wrote in order to reply to Oskar Schmidt's interpretation of Eisenstein Battleship Potemkin. What do we read there? I quote from Benjamin, 1927. He says, proletariat is something collective. In this film, the Battleship Potemkin, for the first time, the mass movement has that absolutely architectonic character that proves its right to be filmed by cinema. Das Recht ihrer Kinoaufnahme. So, already in this 1927 polemic writing, we find the original of that bizarre sentence concerning the right to be filmed. But why does proletariat as a collective legitimately has the right to be filmed? Why should that right be defended? I think that everything gets to be explained only by a note in the work of art, an annotation of the third version. The answer lays in the adaptation of humanity to new productive forces, which is playful and not behavioristic, not reflectorish. And this is what the second technique makes possible. What does this note say? I quote once again, Benjamin, 1935. The goal of revolutions is to accelerate such an adaptation to new productive forces. What's revolution? Revolutions are attempts to innervate a new collective, born in history for the first time, which has its organ in the second technique. The second technique is a system where mastering the elementary forces in society is a precondition to play with the natural forces. Because this second technique aims to set mankind free from the corvée of work. The German term is Arbeitsfrohn. On the other hand, the individual abruptly sees that his own play space has undeterminedly widened. But here, he announces his own needs. The more the collective makes the second technique its own, the more individuals understand how little they had of what they had the right to have. In other words, he who advances his claims is the single man who has emancipated himself, eliminating the first technique. Benjamin refers here, in a vague way, to French socialist theorist Charles Fourier, as many passages in Arbeit sections show, and as these 11 philosophical historical theses sums up. But the core issue of this latter quote is this having what's one's own, which in French is translated by Benjamin himself, le domaine de ses possibilités, so the domain of his possibilities. What we must focus on is Benjamin's attempt to make a connection through technique between the political revolutionary innervation of the collective, the extraordinarily political moment, and the everyday life, where there is an adaptation created by the second technique, which helps to emancipate from the use of nature, and most of all of human social nature, in the key of domination. Therefore, an art which may be based on politics is not just an end formulation of the work of art per se, but it also aims to found the human expression on the social emancipation of any individual. Such emancipation uses the second technique, a technique which is based on playful mimesis, playful imitation. Such mimesis consists of the ability to find similarities through time and to prepare their composition, to edit them in a critical exhibition. But similarities of what? This is the question. What do we have to resemble? I think that Benjamin's answer is that we have to resemble emancipation. To end it up with first technique means to emancipate from the domination and the fight with nature, but also to emancipate from a work which is sensed as corvée, as Arbeitsfrauen. This is what the new revolutionary collective claims, according to Benjamin, in the film, The Battleship Potemkin. It wants to be technically and reproducibly similar to this emancipation. In this perspective, the right, the claim to be filmed, would mean to show one's similarity and affinity with a different kind of work, a work which moves in a herrschaftsfrei territory, a work which moves in a world without domination of man over man and of technique over nature, a world without reflex behaviors, without a uniform eccentricity. This is all. Thank you very much for the